Hello, Ivy here. This week's podcast looks at a call to action to non-UK law enforcement professionals, and we'll be looking at the continual coercive control activities by UK-based organisations, including the firm, otherwise known as the British Royal Family, and its associates in the media, both in the UK and with a little bit of help from certain Australian networks. So it's all about coercive control over a 5-year span and counting, and how I believe that is illegal activity, criminal activity in some areas, and we're long overdue for action to be taken and people to be held account for their activities. So, here we go. To give a little context to this is a reminder that this topic we explored in July in episode 6, and one which I wanted to revisit in light of yet another interview on a UK TV network, interviewing one of the main abusers of Meghan, Duchess of Sussex. I'm referring to her father, mainly for income by most of them, and in one case purely because of fragile egos of family members. They stayed true to form and set out to destroy their victim via instructing others to do the day-to-day deeds. UK and Australian news networks have made a habit out of interviews and documentaries and daytime TV shows with panels of so-called royal experts, all joining in the pylon of one individual who had the gall to fall in love and marry the favourite prince of the British royal family. A whole industry has evolved over the last 5 years, and all of the participants have gained financially by their participation. As a UK-born and raised citizen, I have gone from being horrified at what my country of birth is doing to becoming angry, and now determined to become very active in making this abject cruelty high profile. I am aware that the cartel of protagonists at the top of the societal tree are all powerful, and people in their way get silenced in one way or another. Let me say this right now. I have ensured that sufficient places and people know of my thoughts on this, and quite early on in this plan to destroy a wonderful person merely because she married into a family who did not value her ethnic origin or her intelligence. I made sure that various organisations and people based in a number of countries knew of my views and my thoughts of the possible response, and asked them to step forward with that information if anything ever happened to or against me. That was at the beginning of this process, so it's not been it would be from around 2017 onwards. So here we are in 2021, and the abuse of Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, and her husband and children has reached dangerous proportions. And I do not see any legal entity stepping forward into the fray, yet seem to be able to involve themselves in a variety of countries with the aim of seeking a balance of justice. My perception is that many of the regimes which attract international legal entities are people of colour. As I say, I may be wrong on that, but I have stated it is a perception. I wait to see where the white regimes attract the same interest in the media and the interventions. The level of abuse has been off the scale, and the risk to life on more than one occasion, literally held by a fine thread from being a double tragedy. Morning TV news shows on one particular network rarely went a day without publicly telling Meghan to go back to the USA. Always accompanied with steely stares and clenched jaws and fists. The hatred was palpable. This same presenter has interviewed Meghan's father many times, and like all other media high-profile individuals, or those wanting to become high-profile on the back of profiting from hate, all joined in the abuse, feeling protected by their employer and the invisible contract between journalists and the British royal family. And I would like to add here that every time Meghan's father is wheeled out in front of a camera, he is adding nothing new to what he has said several times before. So they can't even use the excuse, it's new information. All it is continued abuse, continued harassment, and backed up by the TV network involved. Networks, I should say, because there are a number of programmes, but there's one particular network that seems to spend a lot of time doing just that. So they're equally as guilty as the presenter sitting in front of the said father to hear the same things over again. Someone is allowed and is paid to say humiliating things, evil things, cruel things, to cause distress to the same individual that hundreds appear to be going out of their way to make money from by peddling hate. Something is very, very wrong with a society that finds that entertaining. The presenter, or one of them, from that TV network, who also works for the tabloid The Daily Mail on Sunday, whose news organisation Meghan took to court about breach of copyright and privacy laws and won, should have been prevented from being involved in any interviews with the said father, not least because of conflict of interest. Needless to say that the printed and televised media, upon the agreement of the UK royal family, they stayed silent on all the abuse of the Duchess of Sussex, therefore they are complicit, but did speak out about Botox and hair extensions of another member of the same family. Go figure. Together with an array of hate groups forming on various social media platforms, churning out hundreds of posts a day by each group, all of them hate-inciting and often racist, and no legal entity or mental health or women's aid charities stepped forward in the UK to express concern about this 5-year and counting campaign. 70+ female members of Parliament in the UK did, however. A group of all 70 of them cross-party support sent a letter expressing concerns about the treatment of the Duchess of Sussex and were chastised in the tabloid press for it, on 2 counts. First of all, it was a letter calling out their harassment and bullying and racism against one person. Add to that a USA citizen driven to suicide ideation whilst pregnant with her first child, and the fact that it was female MPs who signed the letter was a signal to the mainly male media journalist to gaslight the content of the communication and belittle it as it was written by women. The rationale behind this follow-up podcast is the growing feeling that no legal entity in the UK wishes to stand up and point out the clear breaches in human rights legislation alongside the myriad of breaches in various legal regulations. Powerful forces are at play here, and lives have been lost along the way with people who do not cooperate with the UK media, or they end up practically on the equivalent of Skid Row for not agreeing to be a willing victim. The international legal bodies have remained silent, and I am at a loss as to what has to happen in order for a response to be triggered. For those organisations that I have communicated with about this subject, you too seem to be unwilling to get involved, even if it is to tell me that you cannot help or you do not wish to get involved. I am not naming you in this podcast or the article. You all know who you are. And if you don't recall, look back in your records. For those reading or listening to this, I have contacted a number of legal entities whose role pertains to human rights on an international perspective. And I also contacted global academic centres of excellence in law, not least because what has been happening to the Duchess of Sussex over the last 5 years, and all the hate groups that have formed around the world against a variety of victims, is a growing phenomenon, and will form the subject of much academic research in the coming decades. I also believe that what has happened to Meghan, as a woman of colour, entering a centuries-old institution which could not accept her as their equal, and the subsequent treatment of her, which I am certain breaches many articles of law, and yet here I am, an ordinary person who can see clear injustice and the inherent danger and implications for international organisations to turn a blind eye is worrying. Since when do UN entities wait for an invite to intervene in human rights breaches? What is the point of creating rule of law if the people who are meant to administer adherence cherry-pick the regimes or cartels that they intervene? USA legal professionals and experts, you have a high-profile citizen who was abused for 3 years whilst on UK soil. And just because it was a monarchy that was responsible for all of it, should not make it okay. That abuse has now crossed continents, and it is patently clear that the abusers feel there will be no pushback and have continued with their daily onslaught against the Sussex family. I cannot understand any element of rationale that makes that seem acceptable to ignore. I know that as a mother, I would defend my adult children with all my being if I knew they were being unjustly treated in this way. No one, and I mean no one, could do those kind of cruel things to any of my loved ones and not know that I am on their case. Being a citizen of the UK is nothing to be proud of when you are still treated like slaves in too many areas of business, or at best we are tolerated. I thought the USA would do better, particularly now that we have a new team in the White House. I will list the main categories of coercive control at the end of the podcast and the article. I could write a book on domestic violence issues and how the law fails so many women. Courts not set up to deal with the multifaceted aspect of abuse, particularly when there are no bruises or scars. Coercive control is now recognised in more places, even in the UK, though I have seen no evidence of it in play, but they actually do officially have a legal framework on the subject. Don't be like the UK. Make it a reality, not words on paper. California is ideal to make this a centre of excellence in legal practice on this very topic. The state has a high-profile family living within that state, and 3 out of 4 members of the family are USA citizens. How can it be right that the UK, which is a mere grain of sand on the global landscape, can continually break the law every day, multiple times, and a nation the size of the USA just turns a blind eye? If someone used a weapon that entered your property, would you just ignore it and repair the damage? Would you give them back their lost bullet? Or would you ask what they were hoping to achieve by their actions and that there is a law against such behaviour? You would not wait for a bullet or a knife to make contact with the person first, or worse, remove a deceased person. So why, when metaphorical weapons are used daily in a variety of ways in the UK media, and combined with the dregs of media organisations in the USA who are at the level of the gutter press in the UK, the USA should be concerned. Who will be next? The framework for media in the UK is always to have a villain in the British royal family and to make profit from writing about that individual in a particular way. No matter the activity, those high in the line of succession to the throne will never be criticised. Never. There always has to be a scapegoat, or a spare, as the British royal family unkindly refer to the second and subsequent children of someone who is in line to be the UK monarch. Harry and Meghan left the UK because of all of this information that we all know about. It's contained in earlier podcasts as well, so I'll just leave it at that. They left the UK. And here are some of the reasons. Just bullet points. Over 100 negative articles written every day about the Sussexes, mainly Meghan. Number of death threats have increased. During the last 5 years, 2 individuals were convicted and received prison sentences due to death threats against Meghan. Meghan had suicidal ideation and was refused medical assistance. The Royal Human Resources team were in regular contact with the royal reporters, discussing informing them of confidential information, including the suicidal thoughts. Among the array of breaches in regulations, let me just add here data protection. All serious breaches, and true to form, no one in the legal profession seems to have a problem with that. One royal reporter is on record confirming these regular discussions with Royal HR, both audible and on camera. Despite knowing about the suicidal thoughts, the UK royal reporters increased their cruelty. The negative coverage continued. Meghan had no budget allocated to her, like all the other people who married into the royal family. Harry was informed before the marriage took place that there were no funds for Meghan when she joins the firm, so maybe she should consider returning to acting in order to have an income. Royal family sent her here and there and everywhere upon marriage, and she did a beyond excellent job on every royal visit, yet the royal family, contracted partner in the tabloid press, continued to write about things like the cost of her clothing, among many other articles of fake outrage or just plain lies, and its high cost to the taxpayers, knowing full well that Meghan paid for all of her expenses, including the bespoke items that she had made by local designers in every place that she visited. So, not only was Meghan not an employee of the royal family, denied medical assistance, she was clearly not seen as a member of the royal family either, as she was the only one who had to fund herself during and carrying out royal duties. The only person who married into the royal family who had her name removed from her son's birth certificate, and only her title of the Duchess of Sussex title remains. Thankfully, Archie is dual UK and USA citizen, so the official birth certificate in the USA has all the required details. History will not be rewritten, with a clear attempt to remove Meghan's name from royal history, just like the 2 wives of the first Duke of Sussex. Podcast episode 18, if you wish to know more. The world knows the truth, and USA documentation is proof enough. Meghan was actually informed by Royal HR that she was not an employee, so was not entitled to medical assistance for her suicidal ideation. All that is left then is Meghan was meant to undertake royal duties, give the royal family good press by her endeavours, but not receive the respect of the royal family and work for free. I call that slavery. The royal family messed around and lost both of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex as a result, and what has happened in the last 2 years has been an enhanced level of abuse, particularly efforts by all involved in the UK and in Australia, the common denominator being Rupert Murdoch. no doubt in an effort to make this whole coordinated campaign look like anything but abusive. It is abundantly clear that various strands of coercive control are at play here, and I will list them at the end of the podcast. Abuse delivered across continents. The daily pile-on by UK media, tabloid and televised, was abusive in every way and has gone on for 5 years and still has not abated, despite the Sussexes no longer residing in the UK for the last 2 years, and the abuse also directed at their children, one of which was only 4 days old when the various absolutely disgusting articles started to appear, along with raw reporters behaving like dollar store celebrities, enthusiastic to appear in front of a camera to condemn the Sussexes for any excuse and happy to talk amongst themselves on podcasts financed and produced by UK TV networks, the same networks that run daily abusive content on their daytime programmes, and the same reporters who write salacious articles with headlines meant to attract the clickbait audience that they thrive off in order to keep their heads above water. It does not matter that the content is factual. The sources they claim to use and have are quite clearly each other, because unlike the days when the Sussexes resided in the UK on royal premises, there is no information that members of the royal family or their household receive before it is printed in a USA newspaper or appears on a USA network. Harry and Meghan no longer communicate with tabloids, and because of proven leaks by the royal family itself, no information is supplied. So, all this navel-gazing and hate-filled rhetoric is done to further abuse the Sussexes, mainly Meghan, but also Harry by default, for marrying a woman of colour and one with high intellect and years of work with major organisations, including working as an advocate for women with the UN. Unlike any woman who married into the UK monarchy, Meghan came with a host of achievements and high praise, along with being multilingual. Hard worker with intellect, outspoken advocate on women's issues, was definitely seen as a threat to the cosy pantomime that was a comfortably viewed institution, with no concerns by the majority of the UK public about added value or whether or not having a monarchy made any real tangible difference. The mistake that the UK royal family made was due to their own insecurities and fear that their cosy lifestyle and way of doing things would be looked at differently when the UK public started to notice the outcome-focused way that Harry and Meghan worked with charities. Threatened by a woman who did not need others to write her speeches, in fact, rarely did Meghan need written notes, and just spoke with passion in a professional, empathetic and inclusive ease. The royal family's answer was to remove Meghan from the structure, brought more attention than would have ever happened and would have never occurred in such a short space of time. With every move that the media made, and the silence of the royal family made it patently clear that they were complicit with each act of evil and cruelty. The royal family and media badly underestimated the power of social media and the global news networks, and they who became interested in the treatment of the USA citizen, which ultimately led to the nation's favourite prince removing his family from all he had ever known. The family left the UK for Canada to try and make plans for their future. Death threats had been increasing since 2016. Yet, knowing this, Prince Charles cut off funding for Harry and Meghan without warning, and also informed the media of the Sussexes' temporary location in Canada, which naturally led to a media infestation to their location. Thankfully, help came from a surprising and unknown source to the royal family and the media. It was during this time that Prince Charles stopped taking Harry's calls, after cutting off funding and revealing the Canadian location. The unknown source of help for the Sussexes was Tyler Perry, who provided accommodation in California and security for as long as it was needed. In true UK media form, When it was discovered weeks later the Sussexes had moved out of Canada and were living in one of Tyler Perry's properties, the paper referred to him as a rapper. It's important to remind everyone here that Prince Charles once again revealed the location to the press once he was in possession of the information from Prince Harry. It is no surprise to logical people that following that second leak to the press regarding location of the Sussex family, that it was said that none of the British royal family had Harry and Meghan's new telephone number, including Harry's father, who had been refusing Harry's calls anyway since the Canadian reveal. The stereotyping was so on form. Once they found out that Tyler Perry was a black man who was extremely wealthy, UK media could only think that a man of colour could only be a billionaire because he must be a rapper. No effort to try and research and find out facts before publishing nonsense. The slurs that followed in the reporting about the intervention of an affluent person of colour and the provision of security, it was clear that the royal family were angry and that their latest plan had backfired, i.e. taken away finance and security and increased the risk by publicly revealing the location in the hope that the Sussexes would return, or at least Harry. To do it a second time in the USA location was just evil. Simple as that. The world was watching, and in particular the USA, and they were not impressed. The icing on the cake was the power move by the Sussexes to continue to seek means of earning various income streams, to ensure they were indeed self-financing and to purchase a home of their own with their earnings and to move from Tyler Perry's home without anyone knowing about it, despite media personnel loitering around the property until 2 months later. It is amazing to think that when you don't even inform a parent of your house purchase and subsequent move, there were no leaks on any front. Speaks volumes. The Sussexes also hired their own security team. To attempt to physically intimidate the Sussexes on another continent failed because others saw the injustice and stepped up to assist in a variety of ways, the main one being Tyler Perry. So, what did the royal family do, and its partners in crime? What do they do next? Unable to continue with the physical presence in Canada and then the USA, the abuse switched to focus on coercive control. Initially, there was a range of abuse being employed, particularly against Meghan, and one which nearly led to another death, including that of her unborn child. Thankfully for the Sussexes, 12 months ago, the state of California enhanced their domestic violence regulatory framework and increased the detail of criminality of coercive control on any of its residents. Now, in my non-legal mind, there has been 5 years of abusive behaviour directed at mainly Meghan, and since the couple decided to step back, the behaviour has been in breach of so many laws, to add to the 3 years of multiple breaches in human rights as a whole. I strongly believe that there is an abundance of evidence over those 5 years, and certainly more than enough evidence of abusive behaviour the last 2 years on USA soil, that there are multiple people and organisations who could and should be held to account. For the first time in history, organisations and people who have been allowed to get away with serious criminal activity should be dealt with under the law, and where those higher up the food chain remain protected to a degree, so be it. If others want to fall on their sword for their queen and country, let them do it. The publicity around such events, if they are tackled in a court of law, enough times will create a story on its own about those higher up the chain who remain hidden, but who over time will be known to much of the public, and that underground discussion topic will do just as much damage as the real masters of this campaign were charged themselves. Someone somewhere decided it was a good idea to ensure that this abuse crossed borders and that the abusers were free from liability, either because of their unwritten contract with royalty or because of the power of the press and the media to destroy those who do not comply with their wishes. Crossing of the border was a huge mistake, particularly when the victims live in one of the few USA states which has enhanced the legal process with regards to coercive control. So now the UK has the prospect of being questioned about the abuse of American citizens on UK soil for 3 years, and it has continued for the last 2 on American soil. Time now for legal entities to step forward and stop this before another life is lost. It will help others who cannot afford legal representation and who have not been able to leave their country for another life elsewhere. The human cost is the same, and ultimately when breath leaves the body, the outcome is the same. The UK chose to take abuse across borders, so let me summarise how that abuse has been administered over the last 5 years, and without one legal body on the international stage has stepped forward and declared this to be illegal activity on a global scale. Post-separation control is a form of abuse that a male ex-partner uses to maintain power and control over a woman long after the marriage relationship is over. Gender can be either. Think of all the groups I have mentioned, particularly the royal family and its partners in the media, behaving as though they are trying to keep control over what Harry and Meghan do in life, still desperately trying to cling on to power over their actions. The royal family never anticipated that Harry would leave with his family. The aim was clearly to destroy Meghan in any way it panned out, and if she remained alive, she would get up and walk away. No one thought Harry would leave too. The next step was to take away their security and to reveal their location in Canada, and then again in USA, as we've already said. Charles was willing to place his own son in danger in an effort to force him home and to secure more years for the monarchy. They would never risk the life to the heir to the throne, but the spare was expendable. What a family. Often, when the abuser is in a position of power, the abuse is not physical, not least because of the potential for reputational damage. The control is often psychological and emotional terrorism, which is harder to prove. One example, control tactics using the legal system to repeatedly drag women through expensive litigation or launching a defamation campaign, just like around the Oprah interview, in an attempt to silence or discredit the victim and to preserve the reputation of the abusers. Stonewalling, gaslighting and threats of legal action are all part of an abuser's repertoire. They employ these and other tactics to retain power and control to ensure that you are prevented from exposing them. Think here of the royal family and the media. Remember their behaviour before the Oprah interview even came out, and they are doing the same now about a book that is still being written and will not be published for another 12 months. Only people who are guilty of less than good behaviour would be worried about a TV interview yet to air or a book yet to be published. The two groups doing the most protesting, hiding behind other labels, are the family and its media. Speaks volumes to me. What are legal minds doing? What has to occur for a trigger to move to action mode? Definition. An incident or pattern of incidents of controlling, coercive or threatening behaviour, violence or abuse between those aged 16 or over who are or have been intimate partners or family members, regardless of gender or sexuality, This can encompass, but is not limited to, the following types of abuse: psychological, physical, sexual, financial, emotional. Controlling behaviour is a range of acts designed to make a person subordinate and or dependent by isolating them from sources of support, exploiting their resources and capacities for personal gain, depriving them of the means needed for independence, resistance and escape, and regulating their everyday behaviour. Coercive behaviour is an act or a pattern of acts of assault, threats, humiliation and intimidation, or other abuse that is said to use to cause harm, punish or frighten their victim. This is a quote from Evan Stark, the man who first introduced coercive control, gave it a title, did a number of wonderful research reports on it. I've listed a lot of his work in the reference material, in the article, and there are a number of overheads PowerPoints that you will see. It will give you more information. But this is a quote from him about coercive control. Coercive control is a strategic course of conduct designed to retain privilege and establish domination in personal life based on fear, dependence, and the deprivation of basic rights and liberties. Not only is coercive control the most common context in which women are abused, it is also the most dangerous. Isolation is another factor, which I'll go into a little bit more detail in a moment, where there are examples of Meghan being asked to be 50% of herself and to stay indoors, just to name but two. So isolation: deprive victim of all social supports, make victim dependent on abuser, discredit victim, control finances, phone, transport, confined to home. Exhaustion, including and as a result of sleep deprivation. Creating anxiety and despair. Manipulation of the legal system using male privilege. In 2015, when the law was reformed in the UK, the then Home Secretary described coercive control as tantamount to torture. Testimony of victims could be supported by documentary evidence, emails, texts, bank statements, etc. Controlling or coercive behaviour does not relate to a single incident. It is a purposeful pattern of behaviour which takes place over time in order for one individual to exert power, control, or coercion over another. Controlling behaviour is designed to make a person dependent by isolating them from support, exploiting them, depriving them of independence, and regulating their everyday behaviour. Think here how Meghan was asked to make herself less visible. Think here how Meghan was asked to be 50% of herself. Think here how Meghan's passport and ID, credit cards, car keys, etc. were kept by HR, which meant she would have to ask for them if needed. They would know her every move. As we've discussed already, name removed from Archie's birth certificate, only the title remains. No one else that's married into that family has had that done. All other royal wives have their name and their title on their children's birth certificate. Meghan stayed in Frogmore Cottage once for 40 days without leaving it once, and still someone commented that she appeared too soon. The treatment by the people behind gilded gates, or by groups who act as associates of the people behind those gates, who in turn have hired people themselves to carry out certain activities against the Sussexes, has gone way beyond a family asking for another family member to return back to the fold without his wife and children. years down the line, it has moved into a range of illegal activity, and no one yet has come forward to call it what it is. Coercive control is one of the often unseen elements of the abuse, and harassment of the only person of colour to enter the UK royal family. The sheer volume of race hate, inciting bile, written in scores of articles every day in the UK is in itself a crime. The Sussexes have not been afforded their basic human rights, and to date have had no protection under the law in terms of human rights legislation at a national or international level. After 5 years of such activity, with no action taken to prevent the flow of hate and increase risk to the Sussex family, it is safe to say that only the international legal community can take the lead on this now, in conjunction with the USA. The laws exist for a reason. International laws exist for a reason. If not, just disband all the international organisations who on paper have the power to intervene. Or is it that they only intervene on less wealthy people's behalf, or regimes who are abusive and who are also people of colour? I have zero faith in the UK legal bodies who have chosen to protect themselves rather than take on the establishment. If the international bodies are the same, then let's all shut up shop and go home, and let the revolution begin and natural selection take out those who are not popular. Let's recreate Mad Max, or The Matrix, or The Hunger Games in the modern age. That's all I've got to say on this episode. Like I've always say at the end of my podcasts, there is a very long article to accompany this podcast with many reference sources, many websites, many research papers for people to look at if they so wish. Hopefully you will find that interesting. If nothing else, just file it and it's there if anything crops up in the future, or you think that you know of other people, work colleagues, whoever that you think are showing signs that this may be going on in their life in some way. You can revisit those notes. You can revisit and visit some of those websites and get numbers. There are websites there in the USA. There are websites that are based in the UK. To name but a few, there are other countries, but they're definitely USA and UK ones, mainly USA. There are scholars, academic scholars, university sites that also do research into this subject. So hopefully there's enough of a starting point for you to explore further. Ultimately, I would like to see people held to account for what has gone on for the last 5 years in respect of Harry and Meghan, because I feel sure this and other parts of the world are going through similar. So a high-profile case like this is the very thing to use, and to put something in place, a mechanism, a structure in place that makes people think twice before they go after particular victims in this way. 5 years is enough, and not everybody would still be standing at the end of 5 years. We are lucky that we have Harry and Meghan here, particularly Meghan. And I'd like to see an international group of legal professionals step forward and grab the nettle on this and do something. It's gone on too long, and I would hate to see someone lose a life before any of those same professionals decide that they need to come forward. So, hope you enjoyed this. I know it's a serious matter, but it's important, and I think it has implications for people wider and beyond the royal family and how they're treating Meghan. So, thank you for listening. I know it's a little bit longer than normal, but as I said, hopefully you found it all right, and I'll speak to you next week. Bye. Bye from Ivy. Bye.